Hey everyone, it's Wednesday, April 22nd, and this is your friendly neighborhood English teacher checking in with you about the Metamorphosis. Now, yesterday I had some negative feedback about my fedora, which hurt my feelings, so I thought I would try a different hat. Here we are. Maybe I should do the whole video like this. That way you can just focus on the hat. Well, maybe not. Okay, so anyway, make sure you read before watching today's video because there are spoilers. Spoiler alert. Okay, so let's talk about part 3 of the Metamorphosis. Now, the situation is at this point in the story that Gregor, who used to be the caretaker of the family, the breadwinner who earned all the money and provided for everyone, is now no longer useful in that regard, and in fact the roles have reversed, right? The rest of the family has to take care of him, and it takes all 3 of the rest of the family to go back to work to pay the bills and to take care of everything to replace Gregor's one salary. So the father goes back to be a messenger at a bank, which is, for him a pretty low position. The mom sews underwear, and the sister, Greta, works in as like a clerk in a shop. So they all 3 go to work, and it's wearing on them, right? By part 3 of the story, all 3 of the rest of the family is kind of in bad shape. They're tired. The father is exhausted every night but can't sleep well, and everyone's just kind of worn out. And in fact, they take on 3 boarders. So a boarder is like someone who lives in one extra bedroom of yours, right? So they take on these 3 boarders, and these 3 guys are super judgmental, and they're jerks, and they live in one of the bedrooms. And most people think that these boarders represent like the eyes of society on this family, that they are there as kind of judges of the behavior that's going on in this family. So these 3 boarders, they live there, and they're grumpy, and the rest of the family doesn't feel comfortable in their own home while these boarders are there, right? Like they don't even sit down to eat. They're kind of waiting on these boarders. So that's interesting. And then the next thing to notice is that there's this really interesting scene with Greta playing her violin. And so at first she's playing it off in her own room, and the boarders say, "Hey, what's that violin playing?" And so Greta's father brings her down so she can play for them, and so she begins to play for them. And their reaction is really rude and, again, judgmental, right? They listen to her for a minute, and then they're kind of like, she kind of sucks. And so they go off into the corner of the living room and talk amongst themselves while she's trying to play for them. So it's super rude. But meanwhile, this music moves Gregor, right? And so he comes out of his room, and he wants to go communicate with Greta in some way, and he wants to let her know how much he appreciates her and her music, and how he really wanted to send her to music school. And of course, him coming out of the room in this way freaks everyone out, and eventually he gets chased back into his room. And the boarders are not too pleased with this whole giant bug in the house thing, and so they decide that this house is unclean, and they're going to leave, and they're not going to pay for the time that they've been there. Next, Greta, who has been the one person who's been on Gregor's side all along, right? The one who still cared for him, at least a little bit. I mean, at first she cared for him a lot, but then by this point she's on the edge. But this is the final blow for her, and she has this really, I think, important line where she says, "We must try to get rid of it." And by it she means Gregor. And so now he has moved from her brother in her mind to this thing that they need to get rid of. And she has this big speech where she talks about how it's not Gregor, and they need to get rid of it. And so Gregor obliges, right? Like, Gregor just simply gives up on life at that point, and not too many pages further, he just dies, just in their room, right? And the charwoman, who is like a charwoman, is like a part-time house cleaner lady. The charwoman finds him, and she's like, "Well, yeah, he's dead." And so the reaction of the rest of the family is really important to notice, because they are so relieved. Now they can get on with their lives. They can move to a smaller apartment that they can afford. They don't have to work so hard. They don't have to care for this bug, and they don't have to always be worried about this thing in their house. And so the father, he kind of regains his pride and kicks the boarders out and says, we don't want to see you anymore, and no, you're not getting breakfast this morning. And the mom perks up. She actually goes on a walk outside with the rest of the family. Obviously not with Gregor, because he's dead, but with the father and Greta. And Greta herself is just glowing with kind of relief and good health and beauty. And in the last part of the story, her mom notices that she's young and beautiful, and she's ready to get married, and she's going to have a great life. And so this like really weird kind of happy ending that seems not so happy is how the story ends, right? Gregor's dead. The one who we kind of cared about and felt for is dead, but everyone else is happy, and they're happy because he's dead. And so this is a really dark comment about Gregor's life, and probably about Kafka's life, right? That he feels maybe that the world would be better off without him, and that his sacrifice for his family, his final sacrifice for his family, that he could still offer them, was just to get out of their way, just to not be there anymore. And because he couldn't provide money by working, that this was the only way that he could serve and love his family. So it's a really, really kind of horrifying and dark, and I would say wrong kind of message. But that's where Kafka was mentally, I think. So anyway, not a cheerful story, but kind of a strange one. And like I said in the last video, I think at times really funny. I mean, the three boarders and their reactions are pretty funny. And just kind of the whole situation, of course, is so bizarre and absurd that it's funny. So, anyway, I am going to have office hours today at 1, so if you have questions about the story, then I would love to hear them. Otherwise, that's the end of the Metamorphosis. We will go on to another story, which is a little bit stranger, actually. It's probably the hardest, weirdest one of the collection. We'll do that tomorrow, and that is called A Country Doctor. So, I'll see you then.